Check, check, check. Can we start? Good evening, everybody. Yeah. Welcome to those who have attempted the exam today, and I'm sure you must have enjoyed writing the test. And I'm very thankful to the students who have been writing, texting to me after the exam. And the second exam is also over, so I see a sense of satisfaction among the students who had got in touch with me. And yeah, first things first, it's like a deja vu feeling to several of you. Certain things that we had been reiterating time and again in the class. For example, when you are trying to write practice tests, etc., when I was trying to give the question papers, for example, in the questions other than the compulsory questions, the three questions coming from different segments of the paper, say one from applied physical anthropology, one from, say, archaeology, and the other from sociocultural anthropology, this kind of a combination has been there in the last couple of years, and that got repeated here. Second thing that I always cautioned you is have your basics strong, have your concept clear, and we will be seeing questions that are largely application-based questions. And this application orientedness, which was largely increasing in the last couple of years, we see that is all the more there in the current exam. So that makes it very much clear that your concepts have to be pretty much clear. And regarding the time of this particular discussion, as it has always been a thought after thing, that after both the tests are over, when students who had written the exam, they would also come and join us, and it would be more beneficial to a large number of students. That's the reason why I generally schedule the live discussion after your second paper. Now let us get on to this. Yeah, the trend I was talking about, and more or less on unexpected lines, because there is also this caution we were giving. While you are trying to read the question, you'll have to go read between the lines and see what is the underlying theme of that particular question. Answer you would be knowing, but the thing is how you are deciphering the question that actually matters. So redefining the questions, deciphering the questions. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, student. Expecting 280 plus 90 plus kya tha? 280 plus. Thank you so much, Roy, for writing. And this actually is the day that I celebrate truly, because this is a time where not only you are tested, but being a teacher, I'm also tested whether I'm going in a manner that is close to the exam or not. And having been in this field for more than 2 decades, I think every year this is a stressful day for me, that how exactly the student might be faring in the exam, whether I reached up to the expectation of the UPSC or not. So thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. चलिए चलते हैं, लेट अस गो अहेड एंड यू एंजॉय डिस्कशन। शायद थोड़ा लंबा चले, बट डोंट माइंड। आपको तो ये लगता होगा कि मैडम माइक पकड़ेंगे तो 3-4 घंटे ऐसे ही निकल जाएंगे, काइंड ऑफ, बट आई डोंट वांट टू ट्रबल यू. Several of you might be having your classes tomorrow morning and schedules, but this day I think we should celebrate the exam. And I was also inviting quite a number of you to come to the institute. I mean, those of you who were not writing mains this year, I was inviting you to come to the institute and take the exam. And those who made it, I thank you for the gesture that you have shown, humbly coming and taking the test. And those of you who said you would be writing from home, I'm also welcoming you for that. But I would want to see your papers that you have attempted. Yeah, let us go ahead with this. We are in section A, Mendelian and non-Mendelian traits. This is and you see, time and again it is demonstrated in the exam that when there are two components in the question, that has always been a challenge for several of you. We spoke in person also to several of you who were writing the exam. When two components are there in the same question, that becomes much more challenging. How to divide, how to link them, etc. And that is where here, and this is a pretty much direct question, that is Mendelian and non-Mendelian traits. You would directly begin by mentioning the importance of Mendelian and non-Mendelian principles in understanding the inheritance, especially in the context of the human. Unless otherwise you have been asked, you would be sticking to the human. This is also something that I've been reiterating. Elsewhere in today's paper, we saw non-human primates. And if that is the non-human primate based question, you would get into that. But otherwise, most of the time, the laws, whether in this particular case, the three laws of Mendel, law of segregation or law of dominance, law of independent assortment, such kind of laws you would be explaining in the specific context of application to the human. And apart from the laws, we also expect the student to incorporate certain examples, inherited disease conditions or inherited characteristics, and where in the non-Mendelian traits we talk about how maybe the incomplete dominance could be there, or maybe perhaps codominance based blood group studies could be. So in both these cases, what we expect from the student is the examples of both of them, and how these two have been influencing the understanding of human inheritance of traits. So basically, if at all we are looking at your syllabus per se, uh, definitely we would see Pratyush on that. Per se, because you have studied these elsewhere in your syllabus. For example, autosomal diseases are there, which you can incorporate here in the case of Mendelian inheritance, or for that matter, you have polygenic inheritance that was mentioned elsewhere, or polydactyly kind of things. And in this question, as I was talking to somebody just before the discussion, you may also give a table form where you would give a comparison of the characteristics. 3 or 4 characteristics like predictability can be, examples can be, variation can be, or maybe perhaps what is the genetics that is involved. Is it a single gene characteristic or multi-gene characteristic? So in the case of non-Mendelian traits, you would largely look at the multi-gene characteristic. So I think this whole lot of things that are there, you are trying to fit in that 150 words. I think that should really do good. And there is something else which we see in the second question. This is very, very interesting, actually. From time to time, we keep talking about this Several northeastern tribes are brought into our discussions, and Purams. And look at that. The theoretical significance of Puram kinship system. He is not simply asking about Puram kinship system, but the theoretical significance. Now, when we are talking about Purams of Manipur, see, we have two important people that have studied the Purams. One was Hutton, the other is Levi Strauss. Now, this is a question that brings into picture Levi Strauss' alliance theory. And it is from that point of view the case study of Puram becomes an important thing. And so you would bring in, as a part of the kinship system, the major characteristics of Puram, which are in terms of what are the exogamous groups, such as exogamous clan system, or for that matter, what kind of restricted marital exchanges are there. So alliances seem to be an important element with cyclical alliances. Cyclical alliance in the sense that this example you must have come across in cross cousin marriages. So when we are talking about kinship here, we bring in cyclical alliances, we talk about cross-cousin marriages, exogamous clan system. These are the basic aspects based on which we are trying to link to the theory. Now, as far as the theory is concerned, most often here, the one that can be incorporated is alliance theory of Levi Strauss. And that is where how, from the point of view of anthropological theory and writings of ethnographies, etc., in anthropology, we see that there was a shift from descent orientedness to alliance orientedness. And the time at which Purams were actually studied, that also signifies the shift in the theoretical perspective of the discipline. And also, you can bring in the importance of the theoretical importance of Purams to anthropology, because there were several other writers that were involved, either from the structural functional point of view or from the point of view of studying family institutions of marriage, etc. It shows that there was a shift that was found from largely kinship orientedness to family and marriage oriented studies that were picking up. This also comes as a significant element in theory. Apart from that, Puram was helpful in producing comparative ethnographs in the sense that comparing with African tribal populations, mainstream Indians, or Far East Asian. So we are trying to bring in, it may be a single ethnograph that you must have studied on Puram, but then when he's talking about theoretical applications, you have to bring in how different thinkers had used this particular knowledge, and what comes close to our answer is Levi Strauss. So this particular question, if you're not incorporating Levi Strauss, that becomes an incomplete thing. But yeah, there had been a criticism against the writing of Levi Strauss on Purim, because he was trying to look at it as alliance-oriented society alone. So it is from that point of view you can perhaps bring in the critical appraisal of Levi Strauss application here. And of course, because of the publication of Anthropology and Nation Building in the last year, the books that were published, Nation Building in Anthropology was also something to do with Puram. When we are talking about nation building in this particular context, we are trying to bring in certain broader principles that can be applied to the understanding of cultures from across the country. That's where we are talking about nation building, not in terms of nation building in a general political sense. So you can end this answer with the nation building in anthropology. You have the other one here, osteodonto keratic culture, osteodonto keratic. So bone, dentition, and horn. One of you who had spoken to me in the afternoon, in the break, you were talking about this particular answer. See, when we were discussing Raymond art in the specific context of Australopithecus, we had used these terminologies where prior to the emergence of lithic cultures, when non-lithic tools were used, and that was a combination basically. So, as the question says, osteodonto-keratic culture and its makers. Basically, we are talking about this in the context of Australopithecus africanus, and that's where Dart had used this kind of a terminology. And the maker, africanus. Here, the question demands the evidences, tool evidences of Australopithecus africanus. So basically, suppose you do not exactly remember the tool, but you know the terminology and to which you can connect, which species you can connect. One hack is that you can use the sites where Africanus was found. So sites like Makapan's Ghat in southern part of Africa, which you must have studied, and that's where we find either digging sticks or broken bones, broken horns, etc. This actually signifies. Now, what exactly is needed here is two things. One is the maker, according to Dart and his team, is Australopithecus africanus. Now, this opened a new argument that culture was not unique to genus Homo. It was existing even other hominids such as Australo, and the proof they were trying to provide in terms of these evidences. So your answer has two parts. One is what are the evidences and where they are found. Second part is the theoretical argument whether culture is unique to genus Homo or we found it in the Australo itself. So that's where it is, because Aldovan tools, etc., we found about 2.5 million years ago, and this Australo thing is much earlier to that. And also, those of you who are preparing for your next year's exam, etc., you may study on this killer ape hypothesis. There is something called killer ape hypothesis that is connected to Australopithecus africanus. So it is believed that Australopithecines were hunters, and they were using such kind of tools to kill small animals, etc. That's where killer ape hypothesis. That in fact, in this answer also you can bring that kind of a concept. So basically, you may conclude on this that such terminology being used by Dart, it tries to indicate that maybe, if not a full-fledged culture, but the beginnings of use of some kind of a tool uh, could be established in the pre-hominin phase itself. So in modern anthropology, this is also something that we are in a way accepting. Uh, we are trying to be slightly considerate on whether it is unique to humans. That's how. And last couple of years, I've been asking for this question to come on sensorial anthropology, even in our most expected questions list that I had given, sensorial anthropology, I had incorporated. One of them is smell. Smell as a signal among non-human primates. But what I expect from the student is you have to also incorporate a bit of a comparison of human and non-human. I think in the in the introductory paragraph, you may talk about that. So you may perhaps incorporate terminologies such as microsomatic characteristic among the non-humans. So one comparison is human versus other primates. The other is Homo sapiens versus Neanderthal. In fact, smell sense cross-cultural comparison is something that we do in um, sensorial anthropology. Here there is a combination, basically sensorial plus uh, a comparison of human with other primates. Now you may perhaps give characteristics such as facial physical features, especially the nasal snout. This is one. And also the cohabitation and cross-gender relationships. Thirdly, the practice of marking of territory. Now, see, uh, especially you might not have studied on these lines. But then if you had studied primates, the living major apes, you can use the knowledge of the living major apes like the gorillas, chimpanzees, or orangutan, and even gibbons, using their nature of releasing the order, using the order for maybe reproductive signaling or any other kind of territoriality or hierarchy, etc. I mean, the knowledge that you have had with the great apes itself would be sufficient to answer such kind of questions. So that is where you may perhaps incorporate a comparison of different apes. Because you see, I do not want you to get into uh, too much of detailing into going back to monkey, etc. With the apes, you can perhaps get this answer in quite a distinctive manner. And you can also incorporate several case studies here, different ape studies. To several of you, we were talking about ape studies, the several female anthropologists who worked on different ape individuals, whether that is gorilla, chimpanzee, etc. So I think that document where we were mentioning 10 odd female anthropologists who worked on different apes across the world, they had at different points of time in the document, if you remember, have discussed on this particular trait of showing an affection or territoriality or reproductive relationships that are being communicated. So smell as a communication thing. Think that. And perhaps in the second part, when I was mentioning Neanderthal, you can also incorporate that it's not simply in the non-human, non-hominin kind of, but even within hominins, there is a difference in the smell sense. So Neanderthal seems to be having much more powerful olfactory skills when compared to Homo sapiens. So by now you must have understood that it's sometimes, the small discussions that we might have indulged in, those can be incorporated, those can be grabbed quickly in order to incorporate as examples or case studies. And you have this question, culture and embodiment. I was mentioning in the last batch about Marcel Mauss. Marcel Mauss, The Gift, that was one book we were speaking about. And Marcel Mauss was also known for the book related to the human body. So basically, we are mentioning culture and embodiment in the context of one, that is biological element of the body, and the culture, how the combination of these two. When I'm speaking about the combination, what might come to your mind is rituals related to um, maybe passing on from one stage of life to the other, rites of passage for that matter. So you can begin by incorporating how anthropology, definitely you can also incorporate Mary Douglas in the answer, that could be one. Though she did not specifically speak of this, when we are trying to interlink and write, yeah, definitely you can. So basically, you are trying to bring in the physical being with the socio-cultural being. So that can be on different fronts. One is ritual, rites of passage, usage of this in the study of human growth, cross-cultural comparisons, and so here we are largely talking about the stages, etc. Gender elements that are involved. Gender elements that are involved. And also, when we are talking about human body and culture, several things can come into picture, like economy and the physical being. So it could be gender-based, and then perhaps when we are talking about specific characteristics of the human, if at all in any particular culture group, we see the higher incidence of particular nutritional conditions and their non-suitability for taking up certain varieties of works, jobs, etc., that also becomes a major part of it. Just one second, just hold on. Somebody was actually asking on this, yeah, whether yoga can be seen as spiritual embodiment. That can also be given as a case study, purity, pollution kind of things. That is where you have Mary Douglas also comes into picture. So basically here, there is a mind-body dualism that comes into picture, mind that is largely a part of the culture, body from the other segment. So culture and embodiment, these two bring together such kind of dualism based ideas and shows how human body is not simply a biological entity, but it is also a cultural entity which decides the status of the individual and how exactly, whether it is the age based or gender based, a kind of a treatment of specific individuals varies across cultures. So that's how. So while you are studying different parts of your syllabus, you have come across this particular entity. And once again, sir, it is bringing those understandings to fill in here. So it is the presence of mind that actually matters. Miocene hominoid remains and their significance in evolution. A pretty much direct question. Um, See, there are two things here. If at all you do not remember, you can incorporate this. See, um, scarification, or as you were asking about the Peruvian Highlanders, how they chisel their skulls, etc. For, I mean, as a cultural practice. Yes, it also comes as definitely crocodile clan. True. Thank you. Now, coming to Miocene hominoids. Now, there are two terms here. One is the timeline, that is Miocene. The second one is hominoid. For example, you do not remember about what had happened in Miocene, but then you understand this word hominoids. You also know that Miocene had come earlier to, say, Holocene. Holocene, that's where genus Homo comes into picture. And based on this clue, this hack, you can understand that the examiner is asking you about those hominoids that have come earlier to, say, Holocene epoch. It is in that sense, this is a question that is about species such as Dryopithecus, or Sivapithecus, Ramapithecus, or Oreopithecus for that matter. And so what you may perhaps do is, you can talk about this. There's something like golden age of hominoids, as Miocene is actually called. Golden age because that's where from you see huge lot of primates that can be linked to the ancestry of genus Homo. What I suggest in such kind of questions is maybe perhaps you can give regionalization. So, which are the African hominoids, European hominoids, and don't lose the opportunity of incorporating Indian and Asian hominoids. So, in three different regions, you can incorporate the examples, and then perhaps the timeline could be. And the second thing is how significant the hominoids, the Miocene hominoids, in the evolutionary timeline. So I suggest that you give a phylogenetic picture tracing to maybe Dryopithecus, uh, and if at all possible, you may also talk about Ardipithecus, Sivapithecus, etc. I think that can help you. Thank you so much, Krishna. Yeah, coming to the other question here. I hope my voice is clear. I hope so. Yeah, thank you. Compare and contrast the symbolic approaches of Clifford Geertz and Victor Turner in the understanding of culture. Compare and contrast. So this is pretty much a direct kind of a question which many of you might have tried while preparing, because this is a very simple kind of a thing. So basically, we are talking about the comparison of interpretative anthropology and symbolic anthropology. That's where, simply put, you would begin with that argument itself, symbolic versus interpretative anthropology. And in this comparison, you may perhaps begin by a comparison table. Comparison table consisting of, I'm so sorry, I think color issues there. Comparison table may consist of which were the communities that were being studied, or the approach, whose interpretation it is, whether it is basically the individual centered or the group centered kind of comparisons. And but you may also give the detailing, what are the concepts. So basically, what was the field work, what was the approach in interpretation, and third one is related concepts. When I'm speaking about concepts, for example, it may be liminality for Turner, and then concepts like social drama. And when it comes to Clifford Geertz, we have to incorporate thick description, shallow descriptions, and kind of topics that are involved. And basically, when we use this comparison, not to forget the most important things like Balinese cockfights, understanding of social interactions, and then the meaning of community, how exactly the current relevance of these two schools of thought, these two schools of thought has been. So it is on those lines. And always, for what I found in this particular paper is most of the questions require, in your conclusion, incorporating the relevance in the current times. I mean, in most of the questions, I see this, even in this particular question, how these two have transformed understanding of culture. And yeah, then you have another question, how political economy is integrated with ecological and adaptability perspectives of biocultural anthropology. If at all somebody would get surprised, this could be the question, biocultural anthropology. In one of the tests we had given biocultural anthropology, in fact, the question has explained, he's actually giving a hint how political economy is integrated with ecological and adaptive perspectives. So basically, this is a question of ecological anthropology, cultural ecology, and various adaptation studies. Within ecological anthropology itself, adaptation studies is a part and parcel. But largely, the examples we should be getting from ecological anthropology as in applied physical anthropology. So you may perhaps incorporate in your introduction the beginnings of biocultural anthropology, because that is where the fusing of two major branches is happening because of the contributions of cultural ecology and ecological anthropology. And that is where we see the attempts of the human for survival through adaptation, kind of. And that is where primarily we should be giving Stewart, Ecological Anthropology of Roy Rappaport. That is where you may also incorporate other thinkers on the political economy front, Largely, it may be people like Eric Wolf, whom you would study in ecological anthropology. You may also incorporate how economy and polity is linked to nutritional studies, nutritional statuses of genders and different communities. So that's where medical and nutritional anthropology also comes into picture. So basically what is happening in this answer is you are trying to bring in several perspectives, several components of the culture in an integrated manner. One is polity and economy. Second thing is adaptation in terms of age, gender, and class, caste, etc. And thirdly, how technology is being used as a part of economy for adaptation. And fourthly, nutritional and medical anthropology. So when we are speaking of this holistic thing comes into biocultural anthropology. You must have noticed that this earlier there was this question, culture and embodiment. That's where also we saw this trend that the question is combining a biological aspect and cultural aspect. Same thing is happening here. So yeah, you may say so, Ashish. Centralized system of polity is connected with the resource. Yes, yes, you may say so. So basically here, your conclusions have to be uh, directed towards how the contemporary national and global local plannings have to be bringing together these understandings for the holistic development of insurance of the survival of individual societies. There is, when I was talking about nutrition, there is this other question. I'm reading out the question for you. How anthropologists assess nutritional status of the community, discuss the significance of intersectionality of ecology, culture, social inequality. Did you notice this? Did you notice this? There is this underlying theme, the underlying theme of combining biological and cultural elements, also combining the current requirement of addressing specific disabilities or specific issues that communities have been facing. True, true. So it is from that point of view. The first one talks about how the nutritional status is assessed of the community. So basically, we are talking about one common thing that comes to picture is anthropometric measurements. Anthropometry. So right from the childbirth to the growth patterns, etc. This is one. How different tools are being used. Second is biochemical methods, biochemical analysis. That is where whether it is blood studies or urine studies and all that. When we're talking about vitamin vitamin studies, iodine deficiency, hemoglobin studies, kind of. And maybe this can come earlier. It can be clinical observations. And from time to time, we see the dietary surveys that are being conducted, dietary surveys. And in typical contexts, demographic studies, epidemiological studies. These, I mean, fundamentally, I'm talking about these could be the mechanisms where you are trying to assess different. So I'm here answering the first question, how anthropologists can assess the nutritional status of a community. And the second part is discuss the significance of intersectionality of ecology, culture, and social inequality in the study of nutrition. So whatever you are actually studying here, that is summarized. The application is coming in the second part of it. The application is coming in the second part of it. So basically, uh, in the process of evolution, how nutritional anthropology was trying to study in the process of evolution from foraging societies to contemporary societies, how the food consumption, food production, and distribution had been happening. This becomes one major part of it. Secondly, these can be connected to nutrition related issues in the community, such as food taboos, and various other related restrictions. So that may be permanent taboos or temporary taboos kind of things. And access to resources from the point of view of social inequality. Yeah, I think the first can be substantiated with the later part. I hope you have understood that. So basically, you can incorporate the case studies related to the female status in specific areas. Randomly, if you don't, if you in the run of the exam, if you specifically do not remember anthropological work, the related studies of this kind, even maybe Amartya Sen's writings can also be incorporated in talking about inequality and access to resources. Now, in the conclusion, the scope of nutritional anthropology has to be brought in. All this is a part of nutritional anthropological studies, which is very much significant now in understanding and working on the nutrition related inequalities, particular places, tribes, or mainstream communities have been facing. This could be one. On the other hand, you may also incorporate how is secular trend is emerging, irrespective of class or caste, etc. Larger communities across the continents, we see that there have emerged certain common trends that may be obesity, that may be increasing, cancers of particular kinds, obesity kind of things, or hypertension, etc. These have emerged as commonalities irrespective of the kind of social segment to which one belongs. So I think in that case, inequality seems to be reducing. That is what I was actually trying to talk about. Temporary taboos. When I say temporary taboo, one of the things may be postpartum food restrictions. No? Yeah. Critically examine the drawbacks in assuming culture as an integrated, closed system in understanding of contemporary society. Integrated, closed system. That is the key word here. Integrated, closed system. Now, we should be bringing in, this is the application of your anthropological theory. Critically examine the drawbacks in assuming culture as an integrated closed system in understanding contemporary societies. So basically, the term integrated closed system comes into picture. It is here three major entities have to be brought in. One is your classical evolutionism, which considers culture largely as a closed one, but an integrated one. So that argument. And the second element is functionalistic school, which considered cultures largely as an integrated entities. Though they have directly or indirectly spoken about diffusionism, largely they were trying to consider cultures as well-oiled machines, and then they they were trying to, trying to explain the utilitarian philosophy within that particular culture group. So basically, those are the two entities that we have to bring in. And the third thing in your answer is how, in the understanding of contemporary societies, in the understanding of contemporary societies, in the sense that you should be able to bring in various globalizing tendencies, deterministic ideas that have come up in the recent past, especially in the pluralistic societies that have emerged. So whether that is majorly, the question revolves around the two. One is the classical evolutionary thought, the second one is the functionalistic thought. How these two failed in explaining current globalizing tendencies, and in the multicultural societies, how exactly the closed nature of culture and the integrated nature within itself has been a challenge. So I think that is the meaning of it. Culture navigation and circles of trust. Um, Culture navigation, yes, you may perhaps. But you see, definitely those were not the concepts that were incorporated by the classical thinkers or the functionalistic writers who dealt with this particular topic of mm, you know um, integrated and closed entities. Perhaps you may incorporate the idea of spaces, media spaces and other spaces. Arjun Appadurai's concept you may bring in. So he was somebody who was trying to bring in more advanced kind of ideas. I think that can be, and even for that matter, the postmodern idea of space can be brought in. Um, so basically, you have to hint at the currently emerging schools of thought that have accepted the openness of culture, the dynamic nature of culture, and also the fluid nature of culture. It's not simply the dynamic nature, but fluid nature with the interconnectedness. And also to say that there is that inherent criticism that comes in the integrated closed element of functionalist, that is non-recognition of perhaps the conflict kind of a thing. So uh, yeah, I hope. But then but then the functionality element, the interdependency, integrationist element, they are actually put to use, but with more contemporary interventions, the challenges that are coming up. That's where the theory tends to expand further. So do not outrightly reject them as you are always trained about it. Then we have this very beautiful other question, which several of you keep asking. Pedigree analysis versus genealogy analysis. That is where you have, again, you see, one is used in biological studies, the other is used in sociocultural studies. That's where I really loved today's paper. Mm, in most of the cases, that bringing together and speaking in terms of biocultural adaptation, we see this common thing in the entire paper, and that's where I really loved it. So, question is very simple. You may perhaps use a table to bring in the broader comparisons, or you may explain separately. In the introduction itself, you may talk about how pedigree is biologically significant thing and how genealogies are and who had used in which context. And yeah, basically that explanation itself shows that we are trying to study different generations, inheritance, and characteristics from biological perspective and cultural perspective. And the current utility where more dynamism is there, kind of. Um, the applications for that matter. In the pedigree, how that is linked to counseling, that is linked to understanding disease inheritance, etc. Whereas the genealogies, they seem to have given us knowledge of how cultures have been changing from time to time, how assimilation of cultures had been happening. Whether that is kinship terminologies or any other kind of genealogical content. Basically, when they started for the understanding of kinship, marriage rules, etc. But yeah, now it shows that the social organization of kinship is much more dynamic than what it was previously. So both of them are the foundational tools in anthropology, that is to understand inheritance. So simple kind of a question. You have the other one here. Anthropology provides a multidimensional understanding of human beings by bridging the gap between science and humanities. So basically, this is a question on relationship with other disciplines. I read out the question again for you. Anthropology provides a multidimensional understanding of human beings by bridging the gap between science and humanities. Basically, the question is on the branches of anthropology and the content, the character, the nature of anthropology, in the sense that the fourfold classification of anthropology itself shows a combination of science and humanities. So that is where you have in fact the whole lot of which we were talking about, biocultural anthropology, that establishes itself as a bridge between the humanities and biological aspects. So where are these via media approaches, whether that is medical anthropology or applied anthropology, ethnoarchaeology, or biocultural anthropology? These are all. So your answer must talk about in a way glorifying anthropology as a subject that brings together various aspects of man, irrespective of from which realm they are, whether they are from bio or cultural or archaeological or anything for that matter. It shows that for anthropology, man is the central theme, irrespective of which realm the content is coming from. So, for the holistic understanding of man, anthropology had been using these branches, and it has come up with content that brings together, and we try to establish a connect in biological and sociocultural humanities elements, so that the interconnections can be understood, and a broader, much more closer understanding of man and culture is possible. So it is from that point of view, how are the gaps that are bridged? That is where you can give these examples of you know medical, applied anthropology, ethnoarchaeology, etc. So truly, dating method, which is pure science, is used to demonstrate evolution of humans from Drio to Homo sapiens, or dating pottery, etc., etc. Yes. So each field depends on the other and supports the other. I hope you're all fine, right? I'm sure you're not bored or anything as far as your exam is concerned. Yeah. Mousterian tool tradition and Mousterian culture and its makers. Once again, an indirect way of asking a question. When we are talking about Mousterian, we are referring to Middle Paleolithic cultural age. So the question is, write a note on Mousterian tool tradition. So you will have to give the timeline, one that uh, the Middle Paleolithic timeline and Law Mousterian, and which is the site, what are the tools, flaking methods or Levalloisian tools, various other things, and what is the raw material that is used, and Mousterian culture and its makers. So basically we are talking about the second phase in the Paleolithic. So that is when Neanderthal comes into picture. Yes, 105,000 years, yeah. And yes, the maker, he is known for imagination, or maybe perhaps cave living, symbolic behavior, and all that stuff. So basically, we are writing about Neanderthal culture in that social organization and Neanderthal culture. So I think you must have understood by now that not every time questions need to be direct. You will have to learn to uh, understand, read between the lines. Let me move on to the other question. Examine James Fraser's theory of evolutionism and elucidate the place of religion in modernity. This is a 15 marker. So his theory of evolution, as most of you must have attempted this particular thing. So basically, as somebody was saying that, yeah, 4A, B, and C. This question should not have been left out by students. Fourth वाला question ना score के हिसाब से, and then it was a safe question, very much easy to understand and interpret. So fourth question should and must था आपके लिए attempt करना. Anyways, so basically Fraser's evolutionary trajectory from magic to religion science ये आप criticism के साथ बताओगे. And the second part of the question is what? Elucidate the place of religion in modernity. Religion in modernity, in the sense that he was somebody who had spoken about religion up to civilization only. But this question is talking about place of religion in modernity, in the sense that when there is a scientific temper that has emerged in the context of modern reason and rationality, what is the place of religion? That is what he's talking about, meaning the contemporary worldview and how secularization as a thesis has emerged and questioned the so-called religious practices and dogmas. And in spite of being modern, how religion is still a tool in the politics, not simply at the regional or the national level, but even at the international level, how religion has been an instrument in the political aspects. And fourthly, you may talk about the interconnection between science and religion, whether they are two totally excluded entities. The fact that the theology and contemporary science, they always are indulging in the kind of back and forth arguments. It shows that they are still not totally disentangled with one another. There is still a connect people would want to see in. So as long as this, even in the contemporary world, how the politics, even in the modern politics, when religion is playing a role. It shows that irrespective of the scientific temper, there are always those ethnic linkages that are still playing an important role. Perhaps, yes, you can bring in John Lennox versus Richard Dawkins. Yes. You may also bring in Charan, Marx and Assad kind of a discussion. There are a few other questions, but this is a very delightful paper, I must say. Multi-species, multi-sided, and critical ethnography. Multi-species, multi-sided, and critical ethnography. So, three things are put together here. Ethnography is the core, is the soul of anthropology, and different kinds of ethnographs you must have come across. Here, the question is about multi-species ethnography, number one. When we're talking about multi-species ethnography, it is to do with not simply the humans, but others also. Like if you take Jane Goodall's writings on chimpanzees, so that's an ethnography of the chimpanzees. And there are various others for that matter. Ethnography of the cows, the sacred cow complex. And on gorillas, people had written. On the long-tailed macaques, people have written. So these are all non-human focused writings of not simply a biological writing. It's sociological writing. And multi-sided is something like, field work that is conducted at different locations, at multiple locations, regarding particular people. Say, for example, you have village ethnographies, urban ethnographies, migratory studies. So basically that comes as the multi-sided ethnographic writings. And the third one is about the critical ethnographies. Critical ethnographies, actually speaking, they themselves can be asked as an independent question. I had been asking students to study on feminist anthropology or, post-colonial ethnography, etc. These come under the critical ethnographies. So the ones that are rather unconventional, where uh, the focus is on the marginalized populations and perhaps the ones that are largely neglected in the traditional uh, androcentric anthropology, androcentric ethnography, etc. So these three actually they show that anthropology has been emerging as a subject, studying the content of culture from different angles, from different spaces. On spaces also, I think there was one question that was asked in. So basically, in the 21st century, these are the experiments that are being done by the new age anthropologists. And yeah, you have the other questions coming up. Evolutionary significance of menopause. So basically, this question, this topic was given in the growth studies. So menopause as a part of gender studies being used in comparative studies. Either in terms of tribe versus caste, intercaste, several other ethnic groups such as religion-based studies, regional studies, etc. So these actually show uh, how, with time, menopause had been changing and approaching a secular trend. That's where several theories had come, but we are not getting into those theories and all. It is in this context, what we should be doing is the conventional case studies, which you must have come across, bringing in various trends of this kind. That's where you would be trying to show that traditionally there had been a clear-cut difference that one could notice. But with the change of culture or homogenization of culture, we see that the gap in different ethnic groups, different culture groups or classes that seem to have narrowed and bringing in that secular trend. I think that's how it is. Basically, that is the question. Fish track dating है तो very direct kind of a question. Not getting into the detailing, but then you see, you would be incorporating, explain the basic technique and what kind of materials that are used, whether it is volcanic, etc., and which were actually the fossils that were studied, that were uncovered because of fission track dating. But of course, there had been a huge mm, limitation. Can we incorporate? Definitely, Veena Majumdar studies have to be incorporated. Yes, yes. Sabarimala case. Uh, yeah, you may. As a passing reference, Charan. As a passing reference. ठीक है. You have this mitochondrial DNA studies also we had given in our expected list as a part of molecular anthropology. So basically, the question is mitochondrial DNA and human evolution. It's a very simple kind of a question where you would define and then you would explain the meaning of mitochondrial DNA and maybe perhaps you may bring in the characteristics. The importance in understanding human evolution. So, the three major things that can be brought in. One is human migration studies, that is where we are trying to use in the contemporary times, and in the study of archaic Homo sapiens and interbreeding across the early species for that matter, early hominins. And we are also using to establish or challenge African origin theory of humans. That is where out of Africa theory. Out of Africa theory elsewhere also is asked in your today's exam. So basically, we use mitochondrial DNA either in forensic anthropology or archaic anthropology, ancient DNA studies for that matter, biomedical anthropology, etc. So, things like Y chromosomal studies or autosomal DNA studies, kind of. So studying in evolution as well as. और एक क्वेश्चन है वो बार्कर वाला क्वेश्चन, contributions of David Barker. So basically, whatever we see as the fetal origins of adult disease, that's where David Barker was trying to put forth his studies of the field studies in UK. Yeah, this was based on several publications, and that because he passed away in 2013. Firu Barker hypothesis had come as a revisit in the whole study of fetal diseases in particular communities, especially among the royalty, and that's where the question becomes an important one. So your question is on FOAD hypothesis, basically, and how exactly in anthropology it becomes an important thing. We see that several regions were studied, like South Asia was studied, Africa was studied. Type 2 diabetes basically was a major thing that he was trying to put in. And Barker was challenged because he was trying to underplay the importance of environment and lifestyle when compared to the inheritance aspects in development. And because of the challenge, Barker becomes an important element in the study of inherited diseases in the current times and in anthropology. So basically, and this question seems to be picked up from epidemiological anthropology and inheritance studies there. Out of several questions, this seemed to have been out of the blue for the students. As I always say, that couple of questions would definitely be there in your exam, which seem to be coming from that particular thing. And then you have the other very direct kind of a question I'm reading out for you. What are the genetic markers, and discuss their applications in understanding population variation, disease association, and forensics. Genetic markers. So basically, the first part is you are defining genetic markers. So as the DNA sequences that are basically being studied in order to understand inheritance, population variation, or even the disease association. That's how the definition goes. And then basically your answer is about the types of genetic markers and how these various types can be used in understanding human populations. So those genetic markers which are mentioned in your syllabus itself can be used, like biomedical markers or morphological markers, and even for that matter molecular markers also. You may talk about mitochondrial DNA, Y chromosomal markers, etc. And when it comes to the applications, the question itself is giving three major contexts. One is population variation, second one is disease association, third one is the forensics. So actually speaking, you don't have to worry about how am I going to structure this particular question. Um, the structure is already given. So when we talk about population variation, in terms of population genetics, in terms of anthropological diversity, you can give the examples of genetic markers, and that may be ABO blood group system or Y chromosomal studies, etc. And then disease associated ones as a part of medical genetics, medical anthropology, or pharmacogenetics, public health studies, where genetic markers can be of a great application. When we talk about forensics, the whole lot of things actually: DNA fingerprinting, criminal studies, paternity diagnosis, and all that. So basically, what is happening here is you are reading out the syllabus for the sake of generating the answer. So I mean, on the face of it, it looks like a huge question, but if you decipher, you would understand that merely by knowing the syllabus, you are in a position to answer this particular question. So nothing complicated at all. There is the other question. Agenda of biological anthropology. The agenda of biological anthropology became more scientific from the middle of the 20th century. Justify. The agenda of biological anthropology had become more scientific. So basically, what is happening is from the mid of 20th century, we see a lot of scientific discoveries that had happened. So before the mid of 20th century, it was a philosophy, coupled with the genetic studies, basically biological studies of man. So it's like, pre-Darwinian theories largely. In the post-Darwinian phase, where more and more scientific discoveries started to happen, and that too in the context of dating methods and also the genetic studies that have increased, we see that there is more of technicality that is coming in. We're moving from the philosophical realm of biological anthropology to more technological, more laboratory based study of biological anthropology. So that is where you are to enlist what are all the technological developments that have made biological anthropology more close to the science and technology. Uh, yeah, so it is once again trying to list out the things. So from racial typologies to population thinking, how things have actually changed. So from the Mendelian laws to the modern genetic ideas such as mutation, genetic drift, selection, eugenics. So when we are talking about all this, these are all the interdisciplinary ideas that have come, and biological anthropology becomes much more close to both qualitative, quantitative, predictive, uh, replicable studies. So that brings it much more close to. So this is one. And second thing is how this scientific bent of the discipline had challenged the yesteryear's nature of the subject. I'm hinting at race and racism. So basically, here we are on the one hand speaking about the post Darwinian and synthetic theory phase, modern genetic information, and thirdly, applications in diverse fields, bringing it an interdisciplinary kind of a thing. This is one. Second thing is challenging the traditional concepts, whether you call them concepts such as race, etc. And also, we are trying to use modern dating methods so that we are in a better position to make it much more closer to the study of either evolution or human phylogeny, human phylogenetic studies, etc. So, whichever field we are trying to add to anthropology, when we are getting it from the modern science technology, we see that the nature of the subject is changing. It is becoming much more scientific, much more specialized. So reducing that gap between, as in the other question we were saying, humanities and the science. I hope you have understood the underlying theme of the current paper. The examiner is expecting from you the interconnect, to establish those interconnections between different branches, especially the biological and cultural branches. You have the other question. Describe briefly the theoretical perspectives of linguistic anthropology to explain the relationship of culture, language, and thought. You remember a couple of years ago, there was this question on Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. That's nothing but linguistic relativity kind of a thing. Basically, one of the things that the examiner is expecting from you here is describe briefly the theoretical perspectives. One of the theoretical perspectives you would be explaining in this answer is Sapir and Wolf hypothesis. That is number one. And various other things. One would be structuralism, incorporating Levi-Strauss structuralism in the explanation of language. Levi-Strauss and Jacobson's phenomenology kind of things. And the third major thing would be how ethnography of communication is. Ethnography of communication. And perhaps, when we are talking about various theoretical perspectives, we should by default incorporate things like, cognitive models and social context of studying of the language, social context of the language. So, yeah, those are the various theoretical perspectives that you are going to incorporate. If you remember, basically, Jacobson, Levi-Strauss, Sapir-Whorf, your answer is done. As all other things are the enhancement of this Edmund Leach's language study kind of things. So, linguistic anthropology shows um, that it is a combination of thought, culture, ecosystem, language. So, those are the three things that it is talking about. Not to forget, cognitive studies become a part of it because there's the human thought there. So, as you have studied elsewhere, Boasian way of looking at language can also be a part of it. So that is where ecosystem and language are brought together. You have the other question. So basically, language is bridging the gap. How the study of variation of forms of marriage have led to rethinking on the concepts of social reproduction, kinship, and family. So basically, variation in the forms of marriage led to the rethinking of the concepts of social reproduction, kinship, and family. So it's like how in the initial times marriage was seen as a universal social institution. So whether it was Morgan's thought or the early thought of sociocultural anthropology, where marriage was considered to be a universal social institution, at least among the humans. So that is where you saw various studies coming up, whether that is Morgan or functionalists or various other European biased writings that marriage is a norm in the societies, kind of. This was the early times. So the question is how the study of variation of forms of marriage led to the rethinking. Um, that is one of the things. Double income, wala, that is one of the things. But what we are trying to see here is from the very normative kind of studies, Euro-centered study of marriage, when they started to look at various other cultures, the Asian studies or African societies, Australian Aboriginals, this is one. That is where the understanding of kinship, parenthood, and family had changed. This is one phase. The other phase is the other phase is basically a movement from descent to aliens kind of theoretical studies. This is the second one. Third aspect is the contemporary changes, where the marriage itself becomes a crippled institution or the one that is challenged. When the foundational institution of marriage is challenged, all other entities also become mm, start to face a challenge, and they also need to be redefined. So I think you have understood the three major things I was talking about. Euro-centered studies, when they looked at the other cultures, that is where the understanding of family, kinship, etc. got changed. Second one is the kind of change from descent to alliance based studies. The third one is the contemporary challenges marriage is actually facing. So basically, you should be incorporating things like gender anthropology, feminist anthropology, queer anthropology. These are also the major challenges marriage is facing, or the discipline of anthropology is facing. And in order to accommodate them, you see that the entire other paraphernalia also has to be. The major theories proposed in support of origin of food production, how the change in the subsistence economy brought revolution during. So basically, this is a question related to Neolithic revolution. Several of you have studied about this. What are the major theories proposed in support of the origin of food production? Last year, we were actually giving this in the expected areas list. You remember, those of you who had done the course last year, we were speaking of this origin of food production, Voyasis theory, we spoke about, hilly flanks theory, Voyasis theory, hilly flanks theory, and then perhaps river valley theory, coevolution theories, etc. So basically, the question is about Neolithic revolution and how the change in the subsistence economy had brought revolution. So your question revolves around Gordon Child. Gordon Child's Neolithic evolution, Neolithic revolution. So how is it a revolution? He was trying to explain on various mechanisms, whether that is technological revolution or the socio-cultural revolution, surplus technology, health. You remember, health was also one of the major things. Previously, also UPSC had asked this question on. So a sudden change from uh, nomadic lifestyle to sedentary lifestyle, the new kind of diseases emerge in the Neolithic times. So this comes as I'm pretty much happy. A comprehensive question of this kind I was trying to look for in the last year's exam, but this year they have asked. Broad spectrum collection. You may say so, broad sub. Yeah, we can use. So, no great challenge actually. Majority of the questions, if at all you have that keen eye on the content that you had been studying. And then you have this question, critically discuss the centrality of African continent in the narrative of human evolution. ये तो वही किस्सा हो गया. Out of Africa theory, nothing much. The question is, critically discuss the centrality of African continent in the narrative. So what are the various arguments that you can bring in about out of Africa theory? Who was the ancestor that migrated out, whether it is early hominids or Australo or Homo erectus, based on their anatomy, based on their capabilities of migration. Basically, that is the question. And this is still an unresolved kind of a discussion. That's what you are going to talk about. It is both a political, a racial kind of a discussion as well. But yeah, there is the anthropologists seem to be divided on this. And that's the reason why more and more explorations are happening across the globe, and especially in the Western world, to establish the fact that it is not Africa, but each continent, I mean, especially the Western region, Europe, might be the originator. So there's an independent evolution. It's not necessarily that African origin. This is one discussion that is going on. But yeah, and that's how you would. Yes, of course. Migratory theory. Yes, yes. Basically, it's a common kind of a question that you come across. Some people accept that gene flow from Africa, Eurasia to the other places. Some say that so based on the fossil evidences and kind of multi-regional evolution. You have the other question. How the theories of postmodernism are relevant in promoting social justice, empowerment of marginalized communities. A postmodern, last year we were seeing Derrida's question coming up. Now it is a comprehensive question. When we say postmodern, we are talking about a time of maybe neutral science, or maybe perhaps mm, something like, whether there is a necessity of writing on the cultures. We use another term in the postmodern. It's not simply interpretation, but reflexive anthropology for that matter. So basically, when we talk about postmodern, we are largely talking about reflexive element of um, anthropological writings. And here the question is about marginalized communities, how the theories of postmodernism are relevant in promoting social justice and empowerment of marginalized communities. So basically, when postmodernists are challenging the conventional way of writing the ethnographs, and how ethnographs have to be actually written. So, from whose orientation they have to be written, and basically, um, what is the tone and tenor of the writing? So, what is the content, how they are presenting, whose perspective they are presenting, whether they are going to provide any answers to the problems, identification, etc. When all this trajectory, if you are trying to analyze, it is the reflexive nature of postmodernists that can help, that can give guidelines in encouraging ethnographers to generate content directing to this particular problem. So basically, if you observe the postmodern way of ethnographs, they were challenging the generation of new ethnographs, but then the existing ethnographs, when they were trying to write commentaries about it, they bring about the relevance of the ethnographs that are being published, and by doing so they can give guidelines, if at all this is the situation that they have to address, that is marginalized populations, their problems have to be highlighted, etc. So the reflexive anthropologists can give us guidelines about how an ethnograph can be generated, so that this particular genre of problem can be addressed. So you can actually take this as an assertion and try to answer, rather than trying to criticize. Yes, action anthropology, etc. can be. So here also we see the application of postmodern ideology, basically. So that is where you have activist anthropology, public service anthropology coming into picture. And you have the other couple of questions. One is, I'm reading out, future anthropologists do not romanticize. Yeah, you can say that. You can say that. The future anthropologists do not romanticize the tribal way of living, but they try to identify. Hmm. There is the other question, 8B, genome-wide disease association studies, GWAS. GWAS advanced our understanding of health and disease. Discuss. So basically, it is in this context, genome-wide disease association studies. GWAS is the offshoot of the Human Genome Project. After Human Genome Project, the various applications that they have brought in, whether in terms of studying pharmacogenetics or population variation in the disease risk, preventive medicine, etc. So we are here to bring in various understandings, the interconnection between health and disease from the Human Genome Project they tried to bring in terms of affected populations or unaffected populations, what are the rules based on which one can study the inheritance. And that is where we see that ethical issues have to be addressed and the ancestral studies. So basically in the GWS, it's a combination of health anthropology, whatever knowledge the genetics has brought in, we try to bring it. So causality, it's a combination of causality, ancestry, and genetic studies, privacy studies. So it's a combination of various things that come in. You have one very direct kind of question, the last one there. The utility of human remains in forensic analysis. Examine the utility of human remains in forensic analysis and discuss the facial reconstruction technique. Reconstruction technique is the step-by-step process that you would be, but there are two different questions here brought together. On both of them, you will not be able to give a comprehensive answer because it's only a 15-mark question. Each of the component to be had in 7.5 marks. So the first part says that uh, utility of human remains in the forensic analysis. So what kind of remains? That can be bone remains, that can be that can be uh, dental remains, that can be dermatoglyphics. Mm, So these kind of or the DNA studies, etc., they can help in the forensic analysis either of the gender, ethnic group, or age of the individual, or the causes of death. So basically here what is he trying to say is what is the scope of forensic studies. So this is more or less like parroting what is the scope of forensic anthropology. The second one, if at all you did not prepare, would become the tricky one, facial reconstruction technique. In the facial reconstruction, how you are trying to analyze the skull. So various 4 or 5 major phases that you generally try to incorporate there. One is the skull analysis. The second one is the maybe perhaps the cranial landmarks, you can say, gender-based, age-based, population-based cranial landmarks or the depth studies. The third one is bringing in the soft tissue models for that matter. And lastly, the skin texturing, and then perhaps uh, approximation of the eye color, etc. So that is where various techniques can also be brought in. That is two-dimensional techniques, three-dimensional techniques, or computer-based 3D studies. So you need not have to have a very detailed understanding of the facial reconstruction. The basic understanding that you have from the forensic studies itself can be of a great help to you. That is where we are. So, and even for this question, you may have to write the contemporary applications or relevance of facial reconstruction studies in the context of forensic. So you can actually bring together those two in the concluding remarks. And how exactly all these forensic analysis can be applied in the facial reconstruction. Thereby, one can solve various issues such as ethnic strifes, or you can give those examples that you must have studied in your class, the Albanian studies, or the ethnic strife in Yugoslavia kind of things. So that's how it is. Yeah, that's where I'm closing this particular paper. And tomorrow you may join for the paper two. Paper two question paper also I was actually going through, but we will be having tomorrow that particular discussion time will be notified to you. Yeah, thank you so much for joining. Thank you, team, for facilitating this particular webinar for me. Have a great time. Good day. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.